Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, Thor: The Dark World. Thor has to stop Malekith from bringing back the ether, which brought about the dark times before the universe was around. And if he brings this ether when the nine realms are in the right alignment, he will plunge all the nine realms into darkness, including Earth, and we will have an age of darkness once again. And Thor has to stop this so that it won't be dark all the time, basically. They don't really tell you what'll happen. They just say it'll be dark, and that sounds really bad, much like Mr. Burns, but on a much more epic scale. Thor: The Dark World is the latest film from Marvel Studios, and you can very much tell that, even if it didn't have the Marvel logo before it. The thing I was thinking about with Marvel Studios while watching this film is clearly Marvel Studios has a formula. In fact, so much of a formula that I think they did what the James Bond producers do, and they sat the screenwriter down and be like, this is the structure to a Marvel movie. It's very much like the Avengers. Thor is very much like the structure of the Avengers, down to the, someone they care about dying, I won't tell you who, to an evil being who's going to have this big transporter thing through a portal and bring about some evil destruction. Marvel seems to know really well how to make a big blockbuster, big movie that everyone will like and is incredibly digestible and is very audience friendly. And they're really good at it, frankly. I had a good time at this movie. I don't love this movie. It does kind of feel like there's too many cooks in the kitchen and there's no real director. There's no real auteur voice behind it the way with Iron Man 3 and Shane Black. Alan Taylor, who's mostly known as a television director, he has done a few features, but it felt like a television director directed it. And it felt really kind of corporate, but in a good, fun, big movie way, actually, and it kind of worked for itself. Although it's so calculated with its structure, I'm not sure if I'm half like, this is somebody who knows what they're doing and does it well, or a studio that has brought down Blockbuster to such an exact science they know how to make a really entertaining big movie without having to think too much about it. It's not like the Avengers where this is the big studio Hollywood system when it works and gives you an entertaining, enjoyable summer blockbuster. This is more Hollywood found a very calculated way to make a studio blockbuster. It's still very enjoyable. I don't want to demote a very enjoyable blockbuster because it is. This is much better than the first Thor film. It's much more fun, it's much more action-oriented, it moves a lot quicker. Marvel seems to really know how to do action sequences with comedy. That's pretty much, one of their trademarks. It almost feels like a Disney thing in a weird way. Like kind of the end of a big Disney animated film, almost. Not because they're owned by Disney. I don't think Disney made them do it or something like that. It's just that's the way it feels to me. But they are very good at it. I've read an article on Vulture and it was basically about how a lot of these superhero movies that have happened since the first Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. became a star haven't really made any big stars since then. And Chris Hemsworth, although the ladies love him and lots of people know him, and Tom Hiddleston, none of them have become big stars. None of them can open a movie the way Robert Downey Jr. certainly could. One of the reasons why Thor, the character, and Chris Hemsworth, the star, haven't had that attachment to us as an audience is because this isn't made the way Iron Man is, where you're really hanging out with him, you really have a connection with him as a character. You don't, because they're always talking about these weird, either it's ice giants or ether in the dark realm with dark elves. You always have to hear about that in Thor. They're never just doing a character moment. They're always doing, he's having a character moment with Jane Foster, but he's also explaining how the nine realms line up. He's talking with his father, but they're also explaining exposition. It's never just simply this is who Thor is. They do that a little bit, but then they have to have the score help them a lot and other things. It doesn't feel as organic. It doesn't feel as natural. This film is a lot better at it than the first Thor. I tend to like Thor a lot more when he's in the Avengers and he's playing off Tony Stark and Captain America. When he's in his own world, and especially in Asgard, he's not as much fun. The one who really shines in these Thor movies is Tom Hiddleston, who really steals the show in this. I would like to see him in something a bit better, and he is a fun villain, and he's fun to play off against Chris Hemsworth, the actor who felt like he was having the most fun while doing this. Natalie Portman, I always feel like when I see her in these Thor movies, it's just her doing a job. Natalie Portman really needs a strong young director to get her to really act. And she's much better than those awful Star Wars prequels. But like, if you think of the best acting she's done, it's like Black Swan or Closer, and that's Mike Nichols and Darren Aronofsky. She's only as good as the director she has. She's not one of those old studio stars where they can be good in anything. It is weird seeing Rene Russo in something. I never see Rene Russo anymore. It has an interesting kind of special effects to it because it feels like half Lord of the Rings, half Star Wars, but kind of prequel Star Wars. Naboo in Phantom Menace, it kind of looks like that by way of Peter Jackson. It is a lot darker than the first film. I don't want to say grittier because it does have a rainbow bridge in it, so you can't be that gritty. It definitely has a darker edge to it. It feels like a little darker, a little less saturated. I don't really like how everything's shot in kind of the Marvel style, like there's a Marvel way to color correct, which I find really boring. I wish they'd mix up their style of cinematography based on franchises because, you know, when you read comic books, they'd have different artists, and when you'd have crossovers, that would always be the cool thing. I pick up X Factor, you have one artist, you pick up X-Men, you have another artist. That would be the fun of doing a crossover, is you'd see your favorite characters done in various different styles, and I think that should kind of reflect in the cinematography. I don't know if the idea of the Iron Man cinematography really works for Thor. Maybe it would have been nice if they shot it more of a Game of Thrones way. This was done by one of the guys who's directed quite a few Game of Thrones episodes, and I think it would have been cool if it had been, you know, let's do it in that way. Let's do it in more of a fantasy way that we're used to at this point, like Lord of the Rings, but they do it in the comic booky Marvel way. It feels like almost like TV and less like movies. Maybe that's what Marvel's going for, to have this overarching story and just show that it's the same universe. Sometimes I think that works really against the film, and especially more so in Thor. When Christopher Eccleston and Malekith are going through different dimensions and everything, I think if that had been shot in a really cool, creative way, I mean, that's a cool idea for a sequence. I mean, think of that interesting sequence in Being John Malkovich, where you had Cameron Diaz and Catherine Keener going through John Malkovich's brain and such. That was a really amazing sequence. You can really do some creative things with that, and they really didn't at all. And the way they shot it, it still looked like a fun sequence, but if you had a real auteur and had some fun with that action sequence, it would have been really thrilling as an audience. But the action sequences did feel a little like kind of standard at this point. Using that structure that Marvel uses all the time gives it a familiarity that is fun as an audience, but isn't as fun as and as rule-breaking as it felt when you saw the Avengers and when you saw the first Iron Man. And when you get to Thor: The Dark World, the way they structured it and the way they shot it doesn't feel that unique. It feels like I've seen all this before, and it feels too familiar in a kind of a boring, passive way. Film is definitely a passive medium and so forth, but this felt more passive than I'm used to. I had fun, but I didn't feel enough of a connection with the characters, and I felt like, you know, I almost knew exactly what was going to happen before it was going to happen. Maybe less adventurous audience members will be fine with that, but I kind of think Marvel shouldn't be resting on its laurels so much now that it's gotten so successful. Malekith's villain, honestly, I kind of forgot about. Everyone on Thor's side and the Asgard side, I'm definitely going to remember, and I was thinking about those characters. But Malekith, played by Christopher Eccleston, and quite kind of forgettable, it just felt like yet another villain. The Dark Elves didn't really stick out in my mind at all. But it was exciting enough and enough of an audience-friendly film that I think it is still very strong. Marvel knows how to make a very audience-friendly, digestible movie incredibly well. But is it because they've corporately audience tested it so well they exactly know how to do it? Or does it show a refined hit filmmaker who knows exactly what they're doing? And what's the difference behind that, I think, is kind of Marvel's problem right now. I feel like maybe they're going too much towards the corporate, tested, exact science way to make blockbusters. Maybe more of an auteur voice from them that they, I feel like, are slightly losing the further and further they go down making this awesome comic book continuity. So if you have seen Thor: The Dark World and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.